Great. Well, here I am. I am here. My name is Chris Georgenes, first of all, and I'm a Flash animator. My background is art, basically fine art. And a bunch of years ago, I sort of stumbled into the world of animation just before Flash 4, and was working for a company. Here, I'm on the East Coast of the USA, and working for a company that did a lot of television shows, a lot of animated shows. And long story short, when Flash 4 came out, we switched over to Flash 4 and basically learned how to use it in a full production studio environment. And going from Flash to broadcast animation, there's a bunch of shows that we worked on that's on Cartoon Network today. And anyway, I've been for the past 2.5 years out of my own doing mostly web development, a lot of Flash games, working with teams, putting together Flash games and interactive adventure series types of things, and a huge amount of character animation. And as a result, over the years, I've just kind of developed my own little tips and tricks and methods of doing things. I'm going to show you today a character, basically how to go from a pencil sketch, scan it in. I'm not going to show you how to scan it in. I'm going to assume you all know how to do that, but I'm going to show you how to take a scan, or how I take a scanned picture and basically build it in Flash and get it to be Flash ready. I'll show you the character right now. You should see it pop up right about now. There you go. This was the original sketch, just a simple pencil and paper. I tend to work on paper a lot because I just feel like I draw differently. As opposed to drawing with the Wacom tablet, which is what I have, and which is what I love. And there's, but for some reason, drawing with pencil and paper, I just draw differently. I think I just draw a little better. And so then what I'll do is I'll scan the picture in, and then I'll proceed to break apart and draw individual objects to create this character, and keep everything as a symbol, keep everything on its own layer, and for the sake of animating, which will come after I show you how I do break up all these parts, all these body parts. Now, the one sort of mantra with characters in Flash that I have is that form follows function, and you know, it's the whole reason why the classic Yogi Bear character has a necktie. It's so his head can be separate, so the animators can freely move the head separate from the body, and so you don't have to redraw the body all the time and try to match up the head and neck and body lines and things like that. So this character is kind of a good example of this because it's easy to make all these different little body parts a different symbol on a different layer and still have it look like a whole and still feel kind of cool and natural. I'll show you quickly what the finished product looks like. You should see that right now. I chose this character. He's one of my newer characters, but the reason why I've chosen him is because he was drawn totally with very simple shapes, believe it or not, using the shape tool and a mouse. Normally I would draw with the pen and pressure sensitivity, or even sometimes the line tool, and then I'll use the arrow tool to bend the line tool. But I'm going to show you the reasons why I chose the shape tool, and basically why I feel it's a pretty fast and easy way to do it. What I'm going to do now is start to sort of dive into my timeline. You'll see an abundant amount of layers here. And what I'm going to do is cut these layers off, and well, actually what I'll do first, cut them off one by one so you can see how many different pieces there are to this character, and the reason why I have every single piece on a different layer. Because later when I animate, I like to create what I call a 2.5D effect. It's not 2D and it's not really 3D, but it's sort of in between. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. So as you can see, I'm just shutting off layers and showing you how this dude just gets broken down into the most simplest shapes possible. And Flash is just the perfect tool for this because it's just so fast, and its drawing engine is just perfect in a simple way, enough to pull this stuff off. What I'm going to do is, usually the first shape I'll start off with is just the head, and I'll usually create a keyframe next to my scan, a blank keyframe by hitting F7, and then I use the onion skin feature so I can see a ghost of my image. Let me try to make my stage a little bigger. I like to work with my stage magnified a bit. And now there's so many different ways for me to draw this. I could use the pen, like I said, which I'm going to do now just for the sake of demonstration. Where's my toolbar? I could use the pen and I could draw, but for this, or I could use the pen tool. And go along the contour and bend as I go, or what have you. But what I chose to do, which I think is much quicker, much simpler, and allows me a little bit more freedom to alter what is called the line weight. I'm going to show you. I'm going to grab my oval tool. I'm going to grab a fill color and make it black, because what I'm actually going to do at this point is actually create the outline first. And it might not seem like that's what I'm doing, but it is, and I'll show you why. I'll first create a rough shape. See? And sometimes what I'll do is I'll grab it, position it away, pull it back if it's not in the right position, and I can use the feature where it just turns into outlines when I'm dragging to reposition it. I'm not going to get too technical and too exact at this presentation. If I want to tweak it a little bit, I'll select the free transform tool, play around with the shape a little bit. Now the reason why I've chosen black is this. Once I get the basic shape down, I copy it. Once I've copied it, I'll do a paste in place, which will look like nothing ever happened. While it's still selected, I'll go and grab what is going to be the skin tone. I'll select that skin tone and my shape turns black. Now we still have the original black oval underneath this. At this point, I grab my free transform tool, I hold down the shift key to constrain the proportions, and I just basically make this layer, or I'm sorry, this shape smaller. And now I have the freedom and control to move this shape around. And the reason why I do this is because if I were to create this shape with an outline, the outline would have the same weight. And for this character, I like to go for an outline that has a varied weight, because I think it gives more volume to the shape. It gives you a little bit of a hint of 3D or a little bit of a hint of depth. So what I usually do is I'll offset this shape. I can even nudge it with the arrow keys if I want to, and then I just let go and click anywhere off of the shape. And here I have his head. At this point too, I could add shading, but I usually wait until I've finished the character before I do that. Now, since we have the basic head shape, I will then hit F8 and make it a symbol. And I'll just call it symbol 2 for now. It doesn't matter. Normally I would give it a name right now, but as you've already seen, I have all these symbols already made in my library, and it's just easier. I'll show you later what they all are and how I've named them. And so now what I'll do is create another layer. I'll place the layer, move the layer below what I'll call my scan layer that has my scan on it. I'll take this shape, click and highlight the keyframe, and just drag it, get it off this layer. So now you'll see it exists, but it's below my scan. I'll go back and create this blank keyframe next to my scan. So now I can see the scan, and now I can see a hint of the shape I made, and I'll move on. I just go and now I'll make the ear, let's say. And I'll do it the same exact way with a little bit of a difference that I'll show you in a minute. Let me blow this up so you guys can see it a little bit better. I like to work up close. It's just, I think I have a little bit more control when the stage is magnified as much as possible. I deselect the outline also when I make these shapes. And again, don't have to be exact on the first try. I'm going to make his ear. And now, I usually like to, instead of having exact ovals all over the place, sometimes I'll grab the arrow tool and I'll pull the shape around just to make it a little more interesting. Change it up a little bit, something like that. And again, I use the sketch as just a reference. I usually will refine the character during this process. As long as I get the basic sketch in there, I'm fine. I select this black shape, and just like the head, I do a copy, and then a paste in place. Grab that color, my fill color for the skin. Grab the free transform tool, hold down my shift key. And now the difference being that I mentioned earlier with this shape is that I kind of want those black outlines of the ear to taper off towards the head to make it look like it's attached to the head. So I position this a little off center and overlap the lines, the black shape underneath it to the right. And maybe I'll play around with it a little bit more. Maybe that line on the black outline is now a little too heavy on the left. It's all just a question of perception and figuring out what's the best way to make this ear look good. So now we have an ear for which I will select, hit F8, make it a symbol. And then go back to my timeline. We also want to throw this on another layer. Now let me shut off my scan so you can see what this looks like. And I'll demagnify. So once you do this a couple times, you can get pretty quick at it. Although, you know, the more shapes, the longer it's just going to take to build your character. Let me turn on some more layers. Basically, all these shapes for this character were made this way, with the exception of, I believe, his hair. His body was made the same way. Let me unlock everything. You can see his arm. It's a separate symbol. I'm also going to, in a minute, talk about the Edit Center feature, which is huge when it comes to animating. Just having the ability to hinge objects like an arm or a hand or a knee or a foot. But first I want to show you, you can pretty much well imagine how all these shapes were made based on the last two shapes I made. His head, I'm going to show you how I did the shading. It's very simple. I'm going to grab this color, because I don't know if I have it in the swatch yet. I'm going to just start off as if the shape never existed. What I like to do shading, grab my rectangle tool, grab the shade color. It's just a slightly darker version of this. It could even be a highlight. You could do this with highlights as well. Turn off my outlines. Someday Flash will have that as an option to turn it off permanently. And And I just make a shape anywhere in there, anywhere inside the head shape. And then I'll turn on the Snap to Objects magnet tool option, and I'll take one of these corners and let it snap to the inside edge. Take the other corner, let it snap to the inside edge. Take my eyedropper, grab this color again. I think I already have it grabbed, and fill that in. Let me close medium gaps and see if that fixes it. Yes, it does. And basically, now use the arrow tool again and just bend this line. And there's my shade. I go back to the main stage. Turn on some more layers. Oops, I'm turning off stuff. What am I doing? Chris's first day with Flash. I'm going to show you the hair, and those are just simple shapes as well. The eyeballs are just shapes within shapes, as you can see. Highlight, pupil, and everything else. And these exist within a symbol, because I don't need to animate all those individual shapes within shapes right now. Carlos wrote, you could also just use your line tool to mark off the section, curve the line, then fill with color. Yes, that's another way. Definitely another way. There's his nose. The nose has a little bit of a gradient in it. Just to make it look like he has a cold, I guess. The gradient is simply the normal flesh tone of the character, and then going to a little bit of a red tone. That was it. Very simple. Very basic. This is all very basic Flash. The hair. The hair is, I started, when I animated this, I wanted the hair to sort of flow and bounce, just to suggest more weight and gravity to the character. So I kept it a shape and used just basic shape tweens to make it bounce up and make it bounce down. What I'm going to do right now is just jump a little bit ahead to show you his walk cycle, and then I'll explain why there's this many keyframes, because I used a lot of easing and out, easing in and easing out, but in a way so that I know a lot of people email me asking me, how do I get it to ease in and then ease out and make it feel and look fluid. Here's his walk cycle. I believe, yeah, I've changed it to 6 frames per second just because of the delay, so you can actually see each frame. But you'll notice the hair, well, actually this is a movie clip. Let me, the hair is, all the hair is in movie clips. You'll see the hair bounce up and down. Get the basic idea. Now the reason, oops, sorry. I'm going to just sort of start fresh with this hair just to rebuild it and show you what I did. Okay, here's the initial hair shape. Let me grab the other state of it, which I used the arrow and just pushed and pulled it into this position. Sorry, I'm jumping. Okay. All right, so you can see the 2 different states of this hair, and then again, just applied a basic shape tween. Yes, I can give you examples of Flash that's been used for broadcast. One is called Home Movies. It's on Cartoon Network. It's been on for 3 or 4 seasons. Um, it started off in actually an old DOS dinosaur program called Animator Pro. Autodesk used to make it, no longer does. Um, and I was the art director at the time. We did the first 5 episodes, and then we decided Flash 4 was the way to go, and we figured out how to sort of go from Flash 4 via QuickTime or AVI files to the Avid, our video editor. And once we realized that it could be done, we just completely revamped our whole production process and just started using Flash for home movies. And so that's why, I don't know if any of you are home movies fans or even know what I'm talking about. The first 5 episodes look distinctly different than the later episodes, the last 3 seasons, I believe. And we built huge libraries of characters in Flash. And anyway, let me get back to this hair. What I did was, obviously, like I said, I created a second keyframe and kind of with the arrow tool pulled it around so it would bend. Then what I'll do is I'll go back. Since this is going to loop, I want to copy first frame and then paste it into frame 20 and apply the motion tween again from shape 10. I'm sorry, shape tween, Chris's first day. Now when you play this back, it's going to look, let me change the frame rate from 24 is just a little bit too high for this presentation. Go back to 6. Let me make sure it'll loop. I've never used Disney Animation Studio. Now we have our basic loop, the hair is bouncing, but it's a little bit too stiff. It looks like a tween. Nothing bad about that, but I don't particularly, I think it's a little distracting when things look like tweens, because it looks like, oh, I know how he did that. So what I like to do is just use the in and out feature, but there's a little trick to this. If I want to ease in here and then ease out here, there's going to be a noticeable little jerk in the animation. You can see it when it reaches the top, boom, it sort of slaps back down again. I kind of wanted more of a wavy, elasticy kind of a thing. So what I really want to do is from frame 1 ease in and then ease out before I get to frame 10. And I have found that if I just create a keyframe in the middle and then say ease out, there's still a little bit, I don't know if anyone's ever tried this or noticed it, there's still a little bit of a jerk. So what I usually do about 2/3 of the way down, in between the first keyframe and the 10th keyframe, I'll create another keyframe. And this is the one I apply an ease out command to. And then the big trick thing here is take this frame and drag it to the middle. There's something that happens mathematically that smooths all these frames out so that it's a very elegant motion. And I apply this to just about everything that I want to ease in and then ease out again. What does ease really do by definition? What it does is if you're going to ease in to something, it creates more frames. Not more frames, but what it does is it creates smaller increments in the movement, and then gradually increases those movements to the last frame. So you actually, let me actually show you with a simple object what ease in does. A better example of it. I'm just going to make a basic shape. And I'm going to create another keyframe down the line here. This should be able to show you. And then I'm going to move this shape across the stage. And then I'm just going to apply a shape tween. As you can see now, it moves at the same rate throughout. If I select the first frame and say ease in, it's going to start off slow and get fast. And the opposite is true for ease out. It'll start off fast and then slow down gradually. All right, so let me get back to this hair thing. So as you can see, that's my little trick for easing in and easing out. Now for frame 10, I'm going to actually finish this, and I want to ease back in on frame 10. Again, go like 2/3 of the way down this little section, ease out, and then drag this around to the middle. It really works well. So you get this real flowy thing. This character you can see on he's up there on my site at mudbubble.com if you want to just take a quick look at what it looks like at 24 frames per second. All right, let me get back to this. Let me see. I'm going to actually jump a little bit ahead to his walk cycle. Once I have all the elements built, and again, everything's on different frames. Actually, you know what? Pardon me. I'm going to show you his head turns first. This is the sort of 2.5D effect. The walk cycle I'll show you after this, as I want to just sort of touch on the edit center feature mainly for that. But you'll see, let me show you my timeline for this guy. It can get pretty big, but it's worth it. And with the layer folders, it's even more worth it. I'm going to just sort of play this out so you guys can all see the sort of effect I achieved with just basic motion tweens. And again, this is a pretty slow frame rate, just so I know the delay is about 2 or 3 seconds. But you can sort of see how, I mean, some people thought I did this in a 3D program, although I don't think it looks totally 3D. But it does look a little bit more than 2D, and not quite 3D, so I call it 2.5D. And I'll show you how this was done. It's, again, simple shapes using simple motion tweens, but with a little bit of scale on some of the objects. It can be done. It just, it's kind of a cool way to create a slightly different look using Flash. Maybe what I'll do is copy these frames and start again in a new file. Is there a structure or pattern to use when grouping the symbols? I actually hardly ever group, believe it or not. I usually try to just keep them all, and again, it depends on the character, on how he's designed and how he's going to be animated. But for this guy, I've kept everything on its own layer, and I'm about to show you why that is. This little trick here in the upper right hand corner, I almost always take my timeline and sort of flatten it to shorter keyframes, just because I work with so many layers. Now what I'll do is I'll just try to do a basic head turn. Actually, we don't need, I'm not going to show you his body. I'm just going to concentrate on the head just to explain in detail as much as possible how I made this head turn. I'm going to extend my timeline by simply clicking and dragging it from top all the way down and hitting F5. I somehow missed his eyes. That's not a problem. All right. What I'll do is this pupil, as you can see, is on its own layer, as well as this pupil. And that's because we're going to motion tween them. And you can only have one symbol per layer per motion tween. That's the main reason why everything's on its own layer. What I want to do is turn his head. So what I'm going to do is on frame 10, I'm just going to I'm going to select and highlight all these frames and hit F6. Now I've created a second keyframe for all of these symbols. And what I want to do, is, like I said, is turn his head. So what I'm going to do is select, there's a shadow symbol underneath his eye. I can either move it around with my arrow or use the arrow keys. What I want to do is make the final head turn state. I'm not going to worry about the in-betweens because the motion tween is going to do that for me. So I'm going to just start selecting, making sure that my playhead marker is on frame 10. Move all these things over, but not all of them in the same direction. Now this is sort of where I can easily make mistakes as well. It's you don't really know until you've applied the motion tweens what it's going to look like, and then if it doesn't look right, you make the adjustments. The nose, it'll be amazing how easy it is to make it look 3D when you just see this. I usually tilt the nose down a little bit, and I'll move it over. Sometimes, if you zoom in on it, grab your free transform tool, and instead of just rotating, you can actually skew it a bit. Sort of changes its shape, kind of twists it. If I hold down the control key, I can select all these shapes that make up the eye. Kind of move that over, as well as his eyebrows. Now, if this were truly a 3D object rotating, this eye, his left eye, would not remain at this scale. So what I do is I make it bigger. It wouldn't look like this anymore, because this sort of suggests that it's way back in perspective and possibly wrapping around the face. But now it's a little bit more, it's facing us a little bit more. So what I'll do is make it a little bit rounder and a little bit bigger. Maybe move the pupil around. Same with this eye, his other eye, just a little bit. A lot of little subtle details here. And now the other cool trick is to move what is behind him, not from right to left, but the opposite direction. Like say his brim. I'm going to move this way. His hat, since it really is just a shape on top of his head as I'm pulling it away and showing you, what I will do is kind of crush it in a little bit, using again the free transform tool, and playing around with it. There's a lot of trial and error and pushing and pulling and playing around. Now first, I think at this point what I want to do is actually apply the motion tween, just to see what is going on at this point. So what I'll do is select all these layers, anywhere in between 1 and 10. I should be able to create a motion tween, and it applies it to all by right-clicking. I did that kind of fast. I'm going to back up. I go fast sometimes. What I do is, instead of, I don't know, some people might say, oh, create motion tween for every single layer individually. If you just click the top layer and let it scroll all the way down, highlighting all those layers, and then right-click over that black section, and then select create motion tween, it does it for you. Now, if I scrub the timeline, we can sort of see we're getting there. The effect is close. I think the key there is making that eye on the right bigger. It just gives you the illusion of depth as he's turning his head. What I want to do also is returning my playhead back to frame 10. Is this head, the actual head shape doesn't really move that much, and it's kind of abstract to think that how can I make this look like it's turning. It's all an illusion, I think, if you just take it and skew it a little bit like this and then scrub. It just seems to look like it's turning. And again, these are all little tips that I just learned by experimenting, just going trial and error. And now I see I haven't done his ear. Let's do something with his ear. Maybe move it up. And maybe flatten it a little bit or skew it. Again, just trying to suggest an illusion. Hey, that works. What do you know? Now, another cool thing would be is if we take this ear, let's copy it. Let's try to show the other ear coming around that other side, just to really send the illusion home. I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to drop it down, make sure it's underneath everything. And I'll create a keyframe on my last keyframe here. This is going to be my final position for this ear. And I'm just going to paste it. And it is pasted underneath everything. Let me shut off all the layers, and except for the new ear layer. I'm going to just move it off to the side. Turn everything back on again. Okay. Now what I want to do is just sort of flip this ear. Modify. Transform. Flip horizontal. I have a keyboard shortcut made for this, Control H, because I find I'm flipping stuff all the time horizontally. What I'll do is I'll throw this, just a hint of it, on the other side. Maybe scale it a little bit, maybe make it a little smaller so it appears like it's a little bit further back. Now, right now it's not animated, so when I get to that 10th frame, it just pops in there. What we want to do is just make it tween to reveal itself. What I'll do is select the keyframe it's in, move it back a little bit. It doesn't have to go to frame 1, because then we would see it all the time. And then go back to frame 10, create my last keyframe again, and then we go back again to the first keyframe of this ear, and I'll just use the arrow keys and just hide it just till it gets underneath there. And now right click, create motion tween. So now as his head comes around, so does his ear. Looks a little fast, so maybe we'll just push and pull these frames just to play with it a little. Maybe even apply a little easing out for the ear, since the rest of the head, we're gonna apply the easing and out to this head too. Again, it creates more of a softer kind of animation style. So you can sort of see. Let me sort of play this in a loop for you so you can get a sense of what we've done. Control. I'm going to loop the playback and just let it roll. I haven't touched the hair yet. But again, the same method. In fact, I will. Why not? Just very quickly. What I'll do. Take the hair. Now, I've sort of not explained something. You'll see here that the center point of this symbol, or the instance of this symbol, is all the way to the left. It's at its root, the root of the hair, and there's a reason for that. And I had done, what you want to do is, the reason for this is simply to hinge it. I'm sort of getting into my next little step here about using the edit center feature to hinge stuff. Can't see all the animation, the breeze is jumpy. Yeah, let me try to play it at 6 frames per second here, just so you can try to see it. Yeah, I see it is a little jumpy. Maybe I could, yeah, hold on. You know what I'll do? I'll just jog through it 1 frame at a time. I have my laptop up. I'm watching myself, and I can refresh. I'm sorry, I can jog along in 1 frame increments as it as the delay stops. Yeah, and yeah, on the splash screen of my site, you'll see it at 24 frames per second, the effect. Again, this is all simple shapes, simple motion tween. And on the splash page, I make them look down, I make them look in a couple of different places. If we wanted to make them look down, maybe I'll just quickly do that. Or if you all feel you sort of understand this and want me to move on, I will. But moving down again, there's sort of a limit to how much you can push and pull this character to look in different ways. There's no way you could have him look completely 360 degrees around. But what I'll do is, same thing, I'll create a whole bunch of keyframes. I'll extend my timeline a little longer, create some more keyframes, an ending point, a new ending point. Let's move the nose down. Let's select the eye. Let's move it down as well. And also, the pupil's on a different layer for a reason, so we can move that around independently of all the other symbols. move this down. Move the pupil down. And if the front of his head's moving down, then a good way to sort of help that animation is to, whatever's behind it, to move it up. So his ears are sort of on a plane that's further behind his eyes and nose. So what I'm going to do is try to move the ears up a little bit. That'll help. And also the brim of his hat way back there would look like it's moving up. And I'm going to tweak the hat a little bit. Even this hair underneath this hat, I'll move up a little. And we would see the top of his head a little bit more, even though that doesn't really exist. There isn't really a top of his head. So what I'll do is move, and again I'll explain the edit center trick very shortly. Move these down a little bit. It's all a little bit of, like I said, pushing and pulling with arrow keys, things like that. So now I think we're close. Let's just again apply a motion tween to everything. Boom. And I see that I didn't even move his eyebrows. Every little, what it is, it's just a lot of little things working together to create the illusion. And the other great thing about this technique is that this still keeps file sizes incredibly low. I think, yeah, we're at 5K here. I mean, it's just the head, but I think what's on my splash page is about 8K. That's everything, including the animation, which is why the whole idea of working with simple shapes really works. Okay, so now what I want to do is just move on to where is it? His walk cycle. And what is a huge help is the edit center feature. And what that is, and it's really simple, and you may even already know about it, but again, it's a basic feature of Flash. I'm just going to blow this up a little bit. Select my free transform tool, because the edit center is a sub-selection of that. And you'll notice the edit center point is up here in the upper right. I think it might be best to sort of start with something new, maybe a new file, so I can start from scratch with something like this. In fact, let me just select some things. Bear with me. Sometimes it's just easier to start from scratch to show you. Now I've copied what is 3 different symbols that make up his leg. And they're all in one layer right now because I just pasted them in there. But if you select them all and right click and then say distribute to layers, it does exactly that. Puts them on different layers for you. Alright, so normally once you create a shape and convert it to a symbol, I'm going to break this up. Here's your shape. I'm going to break this up as well. I'm going to break them all up. You select your shape, hit F8, convert to symbol, and you'll see the registration is by default set to the center. You have a choice to set it anywhere you want, but I leave it in the center for now. The reason is if I set it to the right, or a corner, sorry, any kind of corner here, or any off to the side, let's say, in the event I want to scale it somehow, it doesn't, well, it shouldn't. I'm proving myself wrong. Usually what would happen is it would scale itself based on the center point of the symbol inside the symbol. But regardless, for now, it's not that important. What I usually do is just convert it to a symbol, leave the center point in the middle. On the stage, the instance of the symbol, I'll then select the free transform tool. The little white dot that is our center point in the middle, you can click and drag. And I'll place this anywhere I need to, where I think it'll hinge. With an upper leg symbol like this, I'll put it up by the hip. The lower leg, convert to a symbol. I'll edit it probably down by the ankle. In fact, I might push it down a little bit. And the sneaker, same thing. Maybe about right here. So that when I go to motion tween these guys, they're already hinged for me. It just makes it easier, as opposed to turning it and then trying to manipulate it or move it. It's just a lot easier. It's the closest that Flash can get to a sort of semi-parent-child linkage relationship that you commonly find in big 3D programs and stuff like that. So hinging is cool. I love it. I use it all the time. Now the key thing is, what you don't want to do when using, or I should say what you do want to do is do all your hinging first, in the first keyframe, right after you create a symbol, just do it. Because what happens is, I'll try to animate this and then move the edit center point later in a different keyframe. If I move it here, actually let's keep it exactly where it is, and I apply an motion tween. I'll show you what happens when you do it right. It hinges. Right? Pretty simple. Does what it's supposed to do. If I moved the center point, it just blows it apart. So the tween is based on the center point. And if you edit it later down the road in a different keyframe and it does stuff like this, some wacky stuff, you'll know why. So I always make it a point to, as soon as I create that symbol, move that center point where I think I want it and be done with it. And it just helps in the long run. It really works well for everything, arms, hands, wrists, things like that. Sometimes, often what I'll do is, like I showed you, let me see where his head turns are. This is another cool feature of Flash that I use. What if you wanted to move his whole head based on one center point? That can be done very easily by literally just selecting all and only the objects that create his head, selecting the free transform tool, and then repositioning this. Now, we're already in a file that has all these on different layers and with motion tweens, so we've basically probably blown apart all those tweens. I guess not. That's a good thing. But if you needed to, if you were working, let's say, frame by frame, let me copy this. I'm going to just do a Control-C and copy this whole head. I'm going to start a new file, sorry. Sometimes I'll work frame by frame. Depends on what I'm doing. If I'm working frame by frame and I have a lot of different assets, and let's make it even harder, they're all on different layers, but I want to rotate them as a whole, just select them all, create more keyframes, another keyframe down the line here. I can turn on onion skin and move my center point, and then move his head as a whole. Just like this. Basically move the center point down to where it would be attached to his neck. Sometimes frame by frame is more useful or even quicker than a tween, depends on what you're doing, but go. So that's basically how I've done. Where's his walk cycle file? Yeah, you'll see. I'll select each individual one. Actually, for this file, for some reason, I did this a while ago. His foot, the edit center for his foot, is down by the bottom, so it rotates like this. But for the most part, you can see on the timeline, both of all his legs, Everything I did. It's a mixture of frame by frame and motion tween. Sometimes I feel like I just have a little bit more control with frame by frame, and especially when it comes to walking. I've done a lot of walk cycles before, so this is sort of the result of lots of trial and error. And actually, here's a little trick. You can see at this position the foot bends. This is simply just another symbol. But what I like to do when I have to do something like that to keep the new symbol the same as the old, I'm going to just swap this back to the original foot. That was the original foot when I was animating, and it didn't look like he had enough weight. It just didn't work for me visually when his foot got to that position. Call me a stickler. So what I did was select it, right click over it if you're in Windows. It was a command click in Mac, and I'll say duplicate symbol. I'll go into it. Now this is a new symbol here. And that's the reason why I'll also choose frame by frame sometimes, because if I know I'm going to be, if I want to have 2 or 3 or more different symbols on the same layer, I'll just do frame by frame. And here's where I'll just kind of chop this off by selecting it. Just want to flatten that to make it look like the foot bent under his own weight. Grab the rectangle tool and some black. And again, this is all basic shapes. I have not picked up my stylus at all. And maybe even, push and pull and tweak some of this stuff around. Whatever, it's your call. And let me zoom back out, and you can see it looks like it just gives him more fluidity, makes him look less like a tweened Flash animation. Looks a little bit more, even, a little bit more broadcast ready type of thing as opposed to web ready. But yet again, this is totally acceptable for the web because, like I said, the file sizes are just so tiny. Speaking of walk cycles, the best way to do it is to animate your walk cycles in a symbol, into its own symbol, whether it be a movie clip or a graphic symbol. I get a lot of questions on how do you make them walk across the screen, because a lot of people will start off doing them on the main timeline, and then they can't figure out how to move all those keyframes and reposition the character each way to make them go from point A to point B. The easiest method is to just place it in a movie clip, or like I said, a graphic symbol, with just the amount of frames you need. In fact, why don't I just show you? Here's his walk. Let me zoom back out. And then you take an instance of that symbol, and you drag an instance to the main stage, and then you tween that symbol across the stage from point A to point B. So we're actually already in a symbol. You can see up here, we're in a movie clip. I'm going to go back to scene 1. I actually have let me actually just play this. I'm going to test this movie for you. Hopefully it won't be too jerky. That shadow of him is really just another instance of him, of his walk cycle, skewed with the free transform tool and given a tint of just gray, 100% tint. So I'm that shadow is just reusing him. There's no new assets. But what I want to do, I'm going to just shut it off for a second. Let's make him a lot smaller. I'm going to move him off the side here. Let's make him just walk from left to right. I'm going to create a keyframe. Let's say at 50. Doesn't matter for now. We can always edit that keyframe position later. While I have that keyframe selected, I'm just going to pull him with the arrow key. If you hold down Shift and use the arrow key, it jumps, I think it's 10 pixels at a time instead of 1. So it's kind of, if you hold it down, it's just it's a lot faster. Okay, I got him basically off the stage. I'm going to right click anywhere in between these two frames and just select Create Motion Tween. So now he'll pan, but since he is a movie clip, we're not going to see the animation inside while inside of the Flash authoring environment. So we're just going to test the movie. And that's how you make a character walk across the screen. You can see his foot slides a little bit. If that's the case, if you get that sort of forward moonwalky kind of thing going, what you want to do is just insert frames, make the distance between the two keyframes longer, so that he doesn't travel across the stage as quickly. And what I usually do is just click and drag and select a section, hit F5. You can see the end keyframe just get pushed down, and test again. Again, it's a little bit of trial and error, but this one's not so bad. I'm going to test it again. So you get the idea. Now, like I said in the very beginning, you could, I commonly draw with the brush tool as well, with the pressure sensitivity on. It ends up creating more points. I optimize as much as possible, but again, form follows function. In this character, I kind of want him to be basic, simple shapes, very graphic oriented, and it was more or less the look I was going for, just very simple. And so I usually start off simple in that way. And I could have used the line tool. It's really just a matter of preference, and that's the great thing about Flash, is that you can create the same things in so many different ways, like skinning a cat, as they say. So that everyone has a slightly different way of working. And same thing with the dog here. You'll notice there's a dog on my site now. That's this guy again. Started off with a basic sketch. Well, this is a little bit more than a basic sketch, but this is just something I did on a piece of paper during some really boring management seminar a long time ago, and I just kind of liked it. I kept it, and in the same process, started creating shapes, tweaking things as I went along, just keeping everything on its own layer. This is just another example. I have not animated him yet. Let me see if I have anything else I can add in terms of little tips and tricks. For the frame rate, a common question too I get is, what frame rate do I use? There is no perfect frame rate. It all depends on how you set up your movie and how smooth you want everything to be. And I usually use 24 for the web or whatever. Even though that's standard for film, I've yet to do Flash for film, but I like 24 because it's just a preference thing. I'm used to. I know how many keyframes it's going to take for me to get the type of movement I want. And sometimes it's not all about smoothness. 12, it works really well also. But if you're going to use a higher frame rate like 24 or even 30, you just got to be careful about how you set up the movie. If you set your movie to scale with the browser, anything that large might chug slower computers, because 24 frames in 1 second is a lot to ask the CPU to redraw on your screen. I usually try to keep things small. I try to avoid alpha channels whenever possible. Another tip is, if you're going to fade something out, if you have a solid color background, I prefer tint tween to the solid color, because it'll be about a 30% increase in processor performance. It just doesn't chug it as much. Try not to animate too many things at once, and you can get away with 24 easily. A lot of people do, even more. Let me see. Maybe we'll just do a quick. I'm not sure how much more I got on my. If there's any kind of time limit to this, but I'll keep on going. Let's see. Does 24 frames cause the file to be bigger? I don't think so. In fact, if you want, let's just do it. Let's just test it out right now. Where's his walk cycle? All right, here's his walk cycle. I'm going to test this. Okay, Amy. All right, we got 9K happening here. This character walking across the screen. His frame rate is 6 frames per second. I'm going to change that to 60, just to be crazy. Yeah, the movie clip question, I'll get to that. That's a good question. here we are at 60 frames per second, and it's the same. I don't think it affects file size at all. I think if anything, it will affect processor performance on the end user, and marginally. Only if again, if you use lots of alpha and you have tons of things moving and you go full screen. And I prefer to keep a fixed movie size in the browser, and just be smart about what you animate, how much you animate, and I prefer lots of little subtle movements over huge giant fields of color flying around. Um, so something like movie clips requiring different frames, I don't know. I'm not sure. I do know that, as everyone knows, or most people know that who use Flash a lot, the movie clips timelines are independent from all other timelines. So when I'm used, like his hair the hair on his head, I'm going to just quickly show you, it's 3 strands there, but I believe they're all the same. Nope, there's 2 of the same. But they're movie clips, and I don't worry about their timing. If what you're asking is their timing with the rest of the animation, I try not to worry about it too much. I don't want to get that detailed. I don't want to get that perfect. I don't know if a movie clip. I don't know. Maybe someone else can answer that. I don't know if a movie clip has a requirement in terms of a different frame rate at all. I don't worry about it. It hasn't been an issue. Let's put it that way. In all these years of doing this stuff. See what else I can show you. I think I'm almost done in about a minute or two. So anybody with any questions, I'll be sticking around for. Actually, let me let you. I'm gonna just supply my email address. Feel free to email me at any time. I have a little bit of a spam filter, so feel free to verify yourself through the spam filter. If it doesn't even prompt you, I'll find you and authorize your email. But feel free. I'm also on IM as well, all over the place. But yeah, if you're going to go for high frame rates, just be smart about how you do it. You can totally get away with 24, 30. I've seen 60. I've seen higher than that, but I wouldn't really much. I personally don't go much higher than 24. I just don't see the need for what I do. All right. You're welcome, everybody. Thank you. I wasn't sure how many people would be into the whole learning about character animation, but I'm psyched. There's as many of you here as there are. I'll have to look into Moho. I've heard about it. One of the reasons in general I don't use anything other than Flash is that I often work with teams, lots of teams, and everybody uses Flash. If I switch to something else, I wouldn't get a chance to use it much. Another program I use a lot, I really like, is Swift 3D. But ultimately, Flash everybody uses, no matter who they are, where they are. Everybody can share Flash files, and it's become an industry standard as far as I'm concerned, as far as in terms of the circles I'm running around in. So that's the main reason. But I'm always into checking out other programs and stuff. But ultimately, Flash does everything. Sometimes some of those programs will fall short a little bit. All right, folks. I think I'm done. I'll stick around in the discussion, but thanks a lot.